I plan my day. It's got a great big a space for each day, and I spend a few minutes in the morning just planning what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it. And when I've put it in there, I really stick to it.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter. And today Joe's interviewing Christine Morrison of CMA Training. Christine was introduced to us by Mark Williams from show number 163. Though once the intro had been made, Christine and Mark both reminded Joe that they had all met before in real life at a trainers training company event, where Joe was speaking for the lovely Sharon Gaskin of show number 53. Formerly a Merseyside Police Sergeant and a Specialist Crime Prevention Advisor with Great Manchester Police, Christine established CMA Training in 2003. Since then, she has delivered training workshops and consultancy in personal safety and crime prevention to an extensive range of public, private and voluntary sector organisations in the UK and abroad. Typical clients include frontline staff in housing associations and council departments such as environmental services, children's services and adult care. When she isn't working, you will find Christine walking up or skiing down a mountain or curled up with a great book. Back to the studio.
Today I'm speaking to Christine Morrison of CMA Training. Welcome Christine, thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Joe. Lovely to be here.
Excellent. So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do and where you do it.
Right, I'm based up in the northwest, although I work around the UK, and I run a business and I deliver personal safety training or lone worker training to frontline staff who work for maybe housing associations or certain council departments like social workers, adult care, children's services, environmental services. And it's just about making sure that people are doing those roles as safe as they possibly can. Quite often they have to go and do challenging conversations. They often go in people's homes. I worked for many years also for the Susie Lamplugh Trust, and that's also very similar kind of work, doing training for lone workers, personal safety training for lone workers. Mm-hmm. And I do it really based on a previous background of being a police officer up in Merseyside Police. So I've got a passion for this topic.
Lovely. And where are you based?
I'm based in Bolton in Greater Manchester, although the work is usually all over the country actually.
Yes, yeah. And do you work from home? Apart from when you're all around the country?
Well, I guess the normal would be face-to-face delivery. So Normally I would say I'm just on the road all the time and delivering in-house for various organisations, quite often usually public sector ones. But at the moment, like a lot of other trainers, I'm delivering through my laptop in the dining room table. So doing virtual live training, maybe Zoom, maybe on Teams.
Yes, yeah. So tell us a bit more about how you came to have your own business, because I often talk on the podcast with people and say, I bet you didn't want to do that when you left school. I clearly, or not clearly, I'm making assumptions here, but being a police officer is quite a known career path, if you like. But starting a business and training people like you do in the things that you train them in is not something that I guess you would have expected to be doing. How did that all come about?
Well, you're right, and it definitely wasn't all planned. So I did make a career plan to join the police, and sadly, down to personal circumstances, I ended up coming out of that career after only about 11 years, and it was sad because I absolutely loved that job. I'd had a few years living in Austria after university, but I'd planned to join the police, and that's what I did. And when I left Merseyside Police, and a lot of it was to do with childcare issues and things like that. I was a single parent, and at the time, our police force didn't cater at all for anybody who did. You couldn't really do part-time working at all, and I was working nights. I had no backup for the childcare. So the issue wasn't the job, it was the childcare that sort of ended up making me leave the police. But I got a job at Liverpool University, actually doing it was a project manager role, and it was not my thing, so I knew I didn't want to do that. But part of the project management role was to run language courses for people who lived in Liverpool, who worked in Liverpool, to try and give them language skills so they could attract visitors into Liverpool. So it was a funded program from the ESF, European Social Fund. And the long story short is that I got quite interested in the actual language teaching side, and my degree had been in languages. So from there, I ended up going to do a PGCE and became a languages teacher in a secondary school in
I didn't see that coming.
Manchester. I know, well, it was kind of really very different, and actually there's quite a lot of similarities I can tell you between being a Merseyside police officer and being a secondary school teacher in Oldham, and I really, really enjoyed it. But there was the lure of police kept sort of winking at me, and the job came up asking for a crime prevention advisor, but civilian staff for Greater Manchester, and I applied and got the job. And so I was working then doing a crime prevention role in Greater Manchester Police, and then got seconded to the Home Office College up in North Yorkshire, where we delivered crime prevention training to all the crime prevention specialists in the country. And there was a few other things happened between times, but from there I ended up being that the police took over, so the College of Policing took over this training from the Home Office College, and they asked if I would carry on doing the training, but as a self-employed person, as opposed to being seconded still. And it seemed a great opportunity, so it just felt right, so I just did it. So on the basis, actually, at the time of 3 months, a promise of 3 months work, despite the fact I had a massive mortgage and 2 young kids on my own, it just felt right. So I just did it, and I launched myself into CMA training, initially doing lots and lots of this crime prevention training for the College of Policing. And over a number of years, I started doing more work for my own clients. And I actually started working for the Susie Lamplugh Trust as well, doing personal safety. I became one of their national training consultants. And so the balance of work tipped more towards personal safety eventually, and less crime prevention. I still do some crime prevention work now. I do some with a couple of police forces, Kent being one, Greater Manchester, a couple of fire and rescue services, but I would say most of the work now is personal safety for lone workers. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about how you've transitioned from traveling around to working online, and obviously it is something that many of us have sort of gone through. I was fortunate in that most of what I did was online already, but you clearly have had a big change in how you're delivering what you're delivering. Tell us a bit about how that progressed, given it was only like 4 months ago.
Well, I literally this time last year, I would have said, no, I don't do anything online. I don't do any e-learning, and I wouldn't have heard of virtual live training, or probably, wouldn't have ever thought it related to what I do, because my thing was very much face-to-face training, in-house training with a lot of, long-term clients. And it's just completely had to change. So, first of all, when we went into lockdown, I guessed, and I think I was correct in this, that clients wouldn't really want someone like me knocking on their door every 5 minutes and saying, well, what about the training? What about the training? Because they were probably having to sort out all their own staff to get them working from home. So I made a deliberate decision just to let things be for a month or so at least. And in that time to make the effort to learn all about virtual live training. So I did a qualification actually. It's called COLF, or the Certified Online Facilitator. So I did that qualification, and at the same time, I'm part of a trainer network, Trainer Talk, and a few of us got together and sort of practiced doing Zoom and Teams on each other, doing little micro teaching really, and learned. But the combination of those things and attending lots of webinars, I learned quite a lot about doing virtual live training, and then, you know, there's quite a few of the clients one by one have come back to me and said, you know, we really need this training. Are you able to offer it any different way than face to face? And by the time they were contacting me for that discussion, I was up and running with Zoom and with Teams. And so yes, and now I'm working with I would say a lot of the clients that I normally work with who do the training that I deliver. It's mandatory training for quite a lot of their staff. So I think it was just a case of when we would get going again, and it's working. I'm really surprised to be saying this. It's working really, really well. There's benefits for all their staff because they're not travelling halfway across the country to get to a training event, and it is much more interactive than I actually thought it could be. So I feel as though I'm doing my normal stuff now, but I'm just doing it through the laptop seems quite normal.
Yeah, excellent to hear. And what about sort of top tips for anyone who hasn't quite decided to do that? Because I think that some people are still in early days. Some people may just have hibernated for the last few months. And from what you've said, clearly, even when you didn't expect it to work for you, it has done. You know, what would you say to people who are still unsure?
I would say if you can be in a little peer group where you can practice and on each other and get feedback. That was the crucial thing, learning stuff together and then actually delivering mini teachers. It doesn't matter what topic. I mean, I just did personal safety and other people in the group did their normal topic, but it was about using the technology. And so that would be a really top tip. And for me as well, doing the formal qualification, although if I'm being very frank, I got more from the peer mentoring group probably, but doing the qualification made me decide I was going to get on and do it. So it gave me that kick up the backside to start off, and you know, paying some hard cash for that and turning up and it very much consolidated what I was learning informally as well. But then I think another top tip I would give is don't just use all the tech just because it's there. And one example would be in Zoom. You know, one of the features is to do a poll. Well, I would never do a poll in a normal training session. So trying to fit a poll in just because I can seems a bit daft. So, but at first I think there was this feeling that you've got to put all the technology in. So you're doing, but now I find that I'm just being myself again now. My training sessions are usually pretty informal, but with a lot of discussions. So whether that's small group, bigger group. And now, because I feel a lot more confident and comfortable doing the training, I just feel I can just be myself again, and it feels a lot more relaxed and normal. So I think that's got to be a top tip. Don't just use all the tech just because it's there.
Yes, yeah. So I ask all my guests for questions before we start as well to sort of add to mine. And one of the questions you suggested I ask is about your thoughts on lifelong learning. And I think already you've shown yourself to be different to some people in that sort of, you know, a crisis hits, there's a situation, and you immediately went to formally do some learning and then to sort of really take that into even stronger learning with the peer group, as you said. How do you keep yourself learning, and what are your sort of thoughts around that? Because I don't think everyone would have done that. You know, some people would have just sat and waited and then muddled their way through. It sounds like you took some action straight away to improve your own skills quite formally.
Actually, until you just mentioned it like that, I hadn't thought about it. But if I think back to leaving the police, which was traumatic in that it wasn't really my choice and I didn't really want to go. It was just life changes. But then I've just realised I did my PGCE back then. And so I did some formal learning then as well. And I've always done stuff. And it was only last year, I think it was last September, I graduated. I did an MBA. So I'm a bit older than a lot of the people on my MBA cohorts. But it just felt right for me to do it. And I also felt right doing it when I was in my 50s rather than being a bit younger. And I got so much from it. And I think we do, I went to Henley Business School for this, and they do a huge amount of personal development at Henley, and which probably ended up being my overall favourite module of all. Yeah. And I remember writing very early in a journal, you know, I've realised I am an intrinsic learner. I do it because I want to learn and not because I've been told I've got to get this qualification. So that's very clear that I love learning, and I'm a linguist as well, or my background was languages. So I've been trying to do something. I learn languages quite easily, and so I've been doing some Italian whilst we had lockdown as well. So yeah, it is very clear that I do like learning, and it's a big part of who I am. And being involved in little groups where we can discuss some of these things that we've read, or you know, we can share them or listen to. So yeah, it's very much part of what I do. Even this morning I was on a 3-hour course actually, which was all about embracing technology. So again, adding some extra tips and tricks to the stuff that I'm already doing, which is also a really, really useful session this morning. Yeah. So you're right. It's very much part of who I am.
And you clearly carve out that time for it, which doesn't always happen. So yeah. So when you first talked about your role being very much about sort of traveling and working with your clients and being on the road, my initial thought was, I must ask about how you sort of fit that into your life, and what does that look like? Because you know, traveling can be quite taxing on people when you know you've obviously got a life to lead as well. It strikes me that obviously things have changed completely for you, and you're not traveling at all at the moment, and that is, you know, a question in itself as well, because you know you've changed your life massively in the last few months, you know, and not through choice particularly, but you are talking very positively about the online part of it now. So just sort of give us a flavour of how you know, keep yourself doing the things that you want to do, and how things have now changed, and how you're feeling about that now.
Well, I feel really positive and excited about it. I'm actually moving house next week, so I'm not happy obviously about the COVID situation, but I would say if you'd asked me last year, what do you want to be doing in the next 5 years, I probably would have said I'd like to carry on with my business because I really, really love it, but I would like to be doing less travelling and maybe have much more of a balance, so I can spend more time just seeing people, because I can be away in quite an arm. I can be away from Sunday night till, you know, Friday. I can be on the road all week. But I do love travelling, and I get a lot from that. And I've got friends around the country, so I'll meet up with people. But sometimes you just come back on a Friday night, and Saturday is all about, you know, washing your clothes and getting some shopping, and Sundays trying to see my mum, who's quite elderly, and then you're on the road again. So it has been weird in a very positive way. I've slept in the same bed, my own bed, for the last few months, which I've not done for years. But I'm really enjoying it. I've seen a lot more virtually, and I've seen a lot more in the last few weeks physically of close friends and family. I've done a lot, and I'm a very keen walker, so I've had more time to do walking and exercise, which has been great. So it's been very positive, and the actual house move as well. So again, if you'd asked me last year, where do you see yourself being in 5 years, I might have said less travelling, still doing what I really enjoy doing, but perhaps more of a balance, maybe at some point even doing some e-learning work, so that I might have, you know, there might be some passive income at some point coming in, and living more in a rural environment. And next week I'm moving to a village in Lancashire, and I find myself doing you know, that the work that I was hoping to do in a few years. So it's been a strange but positive time for me.
So it's interesting, the thing you said about sort of meeting more people. I was reflecting, talking to someone the other day, that, you know, I've never been one who's wanted to go out and meet people for coffee, because by the time you've driven somewhere for half an hour and had your coffee and driven home again, that's like half your day gone. But people weren't really up for meeting online. It was seen as being the sort of second-class citizen to meeting in real life, and so I've been really pleased that people have come to me now But you can just have a half an hour coffee online, and that's it. And you can do like 3 or 4 of them in the same time as it would take you to travel all around. And swapping from one to the other is really easy in an online situation compared to sort of real life. So it's interesting how I feel like I've spoken to more people since I've not left the house than before. It's odd, isn't it?
It is odd, and it's that leveraging of time that you've just sort of hit on the head. Hit the nail on the head. It's that getting more time because you're not having to spend. I hadn't realised how much time I spent actually travelling, or being on the train, or waiting for a train, or crossing London. Just hadn't realised until I wasn't doing it. And also how much money you're spending in coffee shops and prep for lunch and things like that. That's incredible how much, what isn't coming out of my bank account at the moment, which would normally be trickling out all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about getting done what you need to get done? What sort of tools and apps and sort of systems do you use for making sure that you're running your business as you want to?
Okay, so I'm. If you were going to ask me where do you really need to do a bit of work, I probably would have said on things like automation and stuff like that. But I do. I have got there's an app I really like called Things, which is a kind of a to-do. It's not automation by any means, but it's a to-do list type of app. But what I really do, what I do genuinely well, I think, is, and it sounds a bit old-fashioned, but I have a big journal, and this has worked really well for me since not traveling because it's too big to carry around with me. But it's a huge book called The Law of Attraction Planner, and I plan my day. It's got a great big a space for each day, and I spend a few minutes in the morning just planning what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it. And when I've put it in there, I really stick to it. And I find myself much better organised when I do use that planner, and I can jot other things down, so I can a little bit of journaling as well. But it's the planning what I'm going to do each day, and getting that book Eat That Frog. Have you read that? Mm-hmm. Yes, that's one of my favourites, and that. So I put down every morning what's going to be the frog, and make sure and genuinely I do it, which is I wouldn't have done in the past. So I find that really works for me. And the automation is going to be coming, but I was having a conversation with somebody else recently about the automation, because everybody else does automation, and doesn't mean to say I have to. And I actually work with a number of long-term clients, and I don't need automation for those conversations. I just need to have a conversation with them, or a quick email, or a quick catch-up. So I've decided a little bit to run my own race a bit more and not worry about what everyone else is doing, and just look after the clients that I've worked with for years and years. And funnily enough, this morning somebody's just popped out of the woodwork who I've not worked with for a few years, because they went through a merger, and they were it was actually more of a takeover. And my old L&D contact lost his job through the merger. So anyway, so they started doing their personal safety training a different way, I think, or maybe doing some in-house e-learning, and they've popped up this morning. I think looking after your clients is my number one tip, and I'll put it in front of automation or blogging even, or sticking stuff on LinkedIn. And I watch other people, think, I should be doing all of this. And then, no, actually what works for me is definitely to work with the existing people who are choosing to have personal safety as a mandatory course for their staff, or for their lone working staff. And they have it as every 2 years, maybe, or every 3 years. So it makes so much more sense to focus my time on existing clients, really.
Yes, yeah. And I love that. You're certainly in the right place in terms of my stuff is always around, what's right for you, and being really clear about that. I think, as you say, so many people sort of jump on the bandwagon, or think, they're doing it, I ought to be, and end up sort of doing a half job on something. And actually it's so much about individuals, and that's one of the things that I struggled with when I started my Power to Live More business for home-based coaches and consultants, around this sort of productivity and getting things done, and getting to live more. So that's do the things that you want to do and less the stuff you don't. The struggle I had at the beginning was well, I can't tell people it's a program or a specific way of doing things, because there isn't a specific way of doing things. It's what works for you as an individual, and that's the sort of key. So it's not cookie cutter at all, because as you've just said, we're all different, and great that you've identified your biggest lever in your business is that relationship building and maintaining, and throw everything at that, because as long as you say, they keep needing the training every so often, that you've got the next however many years mapped out, don't you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And a typical client would be a housing association, let's say, based in the south, who might just drop me an email late in the financial year, just said, "Oh, hi, Christine, can we just book in some dates for next year? Well, we want 27. And that, and that's from, no, I've not done a LinkedIn post to get that. I've just done a good job in the classroom, fed back, regularly, being, I would say, a good supplier, and had a sort of good relationship with the people from the L&D team, or sometimes I work with health and safety team. It depends on the organisation, and just having that relationship, and then the work will just come back. So I think, for me, definitely, it's very much about nurturing relationships and doing a good job in the classroom, and not trying to spread myself too thin.
Mm-hmm. So what tips have you got for nurturing those relationships? Have you got things that you do, that you sort of diary to keep in touch and so on?
I don't, and I think this is something that I perhaps should do, but I don't, because I do it automatically. I might only be working with, I don't know, between 10 and 15 companies on a regular basis. So I know all those people pretty well, and after each session, I always do a little bit of feedback for them, which is not part of any, it's not something that they've asked for, but I always do it. And that all in itself just creates a little bit of relationship building without me even having to think about diarying, putting anything in the diary. So, and it's just something really, really simple. I capture feedback from the group, even if they're doing, it's not a happy sheet or something. It's just something quickly. I might say, what will you take away and use from this training today? And little bits like that. What can you go and use in your personal life? What can you use in your professional life? And how useful was this training? I'll just capture snippets on Post-it notes, and I usually type it up and feed it back through to the learning development manager. And so that'll be straight on the back of a course. Very, very simple. Probably takes me 15 or 20 minutes to do an email with this little bit of feedback in it, and they're always extremely grateful for it, and they tend to keep it. And also, sorry, one of the bits of feedback is there anything you'd like to tell your company or your health and safety manager about issues to do with personal safety? So they've got a really good opportunity to give really clear and hot and quick and dirty feedback, but through to the right person. So if they've got something that's been really bothering them and they don't want to bring it up with a line manager, I'm able just to capture that feedback and send it through. So the health and safety manager always appreciates this feedback, and the L&D managers do as well. And it's just such a small part of my day, but it plays out really well.
Yes,
it's very positive.
So changing the subject, talk a bit about keeping sort of fit and healthy and full of energy for your business. Again, that's changed. You've already mentioned that you've had time to walk a lot since lockdown. I guess it was harder to do this when you were travelling more than perhaps it is now. What sort of things do you sort of ensure that you do to keep yourself energised for what you need to do?
Okay, so aside from the COVID situation, I've always been very sporty and quite keen on being outside. So I'm a keen skier, keen walker. Ideally, I would go up to the lakes a few times. I don't live too far from the Lake District, actually, so I can get up there and up and down in a day. So that's something I would normally do. But the last few months, I've walked every day, just probably about 5 miles. There's lots of walks from where I live without even getting the car. So doing it, but I've had the time to perhaps just get up and go out before starting to work, which you can't do from a hotel room, or you have to be so super disciplined to do that. It's just not as easy as it from a hotel room around the country. And I've started the I was very impressed by the Joe Wicks thing, and I've started his 90-day, I don't know if you've seen it, there's 90-day challenge, which is doing lots of those high intensity but fun high intensity interval training sessions, quite fun and healthy. It's not dieting by a long chalk, because I find myself eating way more than I would normally, but it's healthier eating them than I do when I'm always on the road. When I'm working away, I find I'm either at a Pret or a Marks and Spencer's food outlet, or I'm eating a big pub tea with maybe 2 glasses of wine. And so I'm eating a lot healthier than I usually do. And I'm getting to do more exercise, so it's good.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Joe Wicks. My mother-in-law started doing the daily stuff as soon as we went into lockdown, as did some of the family. But she's carried it on. She does 3 sessions a day. Age 76 with Joe Wicks in her sitting room. It's so funny.
That's amazing, and that's what I really like the guy as well. He's likable, isn't he? I mean, he just comes across as a really nice guy who just wants you to feel good. And he's got a little mantra that you never feel bad after doing a workout, and it's quite true. And he makes it fun as well, and it's short enough and so I'm sure I get on very well with your mother-in-law, because it is fun, and you do feel better afterwards, and you can do it at your own level. So I don't know if she can do star jumps and burpees, but he gives you the option to do the slow-mo version if you want. And
I can't see her doing burpees, to be fair. She does still ski, but I can't see her doing burpees, so but I'll ask her later.
Ask her, but you can do the slow-mo ones with him. So you kind of walk down and walk back and walk up, know. So if I'm being quite honest, I don't do the full burpee either at the moment, but I can feel myself getting fitter, even though I've always been very sporty. I think I'm fitter now because I'm 60 than I was when I was 40. That's doing something every day rather than doing a couple of games of netball a week. I'm doing something every day. It makes me a lot fitter.
Oh, you're a fellow netballer, are you?
I am, yeah.
Or not at the moment? Yeah, I do. I haven't. I had stopped a little bit before even lockdown, but I just started to get back into it. And my daughter plays a ton, so she was playing about 7 times a week this time last year. So you reminded me actually, because they've sent challenges every week for her from her netball club, and she's not been as diligent as she might have been. So she's got a load of catching up to do.
Yeah. And it's easy to let it go, isn't it? A little bit.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, what about we talked about learning and improving earlier, and when I ask people that, I often say, what about sort of books, podcasts, and things that you might listen to? You asked me about asking you about your best personal development and business books. So which would you be recommending?
I have actually got loads that I really, really love, but we mentioned one before, which was Eat That Frog, which is for me, it's a really important thing, because I was terrible at I was very good at procrastination, in that I procrastinated far too much. And I think it was when I was doing my MBA dissertation, I'd be looking at the windows and thinking, I'm going to clean the windows now, because it was just anything but do the work on the dissertation. And
I used to clean my oven.
Yeah, exactly. And so I read that book during that time, and it changed my mindset quite a lot. So that was a great book, Eat That Frog. So get the worst bit of work out of the way when you're at your freshest.
Yes.
And there's loads of others, but we've just mentioned before about leverage. We talk about leveraging time, and I've got a book called Life Leverage by Rob Moore, which is, and it's about make sure that you're not don't try and do everything yourself, because you won't be very good at everything for sure. And if there's things that you can outsource, if it means you freeing up more of your time to do the things that you're really good at, then why wouldn't you do that? And I think I love the ethos of this book, and I've actually done quite a lot more of that recently. I found it works really well for me. So I'm not great at designing things like super duper PowerPoint slides. So why not get somebody else who can do it in 10 minutes what would take me a day to do? So I'd happily pay someone for their expertise, rather than try and spend a day and getting really frustrated and ultimately not doing a particularly good job. So Life Leverage is a fantastic one.
Yeah, and that's just to say, that's your version of automation. When you were saying, you know, everyone's talking about automation, I'm not sure if it's for me. You're outsourcing, which is why you don't need to automate, because, you know, you've got those things happening for you, rather than you having to do them yourself. And interesting, Rob Moore is a fellow podcast guest, as is Sharon Gaskin, who you mentioned for the Trainers Training Company earlier in the interview as well. So we're doing lots of good loops here.
Oh, well, I hadn't realised, because I love I find his books brilliant, and they make me full of like positivity and energy. So that, yeah, fabulous. And have you heard of a book called The Squiggly Career?
Oh, I think vaguely, but tell us more.
Well, this is it's called The Squiggly Career, and it's by two ladies called Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis. And basically, what they're saying is nowadays they both worked in corporates for years, and they said, you know, what used to be the very normal progression, like up a ladder, you know, in one organisation and up the sort of ladder, that doesn't happen anymore. And people now have instead of a linear or a ladder type of career, they have this squiggly career. So it's quite normal then to go from different organisations, maybe different roles, quite often different sectors. Sometimes you go back, which in years gone by, you almost didn't ever go back to the same place of work. And they've got a really, I met Helen actually when we both were doing our MBA at Henley at a similar time, and I met her briefly then. And I could tell she was brilliant. At the time, she was the marketing manager for Virgin. But since then, her and Sarah both set up a business called Amazing If. And they co-wrote this book, which has been out since January. And it's all about playing to your super strengths, knowing what your own strength is, and then playing to those. So spending most of your time focused on your strengths, and rather than trying to do like the PowerPoint example I just gave you, you know. So and working, so discovering your values as well. So knowing what your own values are, and then making sure that whatever work you accept or follow, or what role you're doing, that it fits with your values. And then they're also very clear about, you know, everyone's got confidence gremlins and how to overcome those, and how to build better support networks. And it's just a really, really good book. And they've got a podcast of the same name, which is also fantastic. The podcast is themed, so if you looked on the website, you can go in and you can cherry pick actually, which, you know, I'm really interested in. Oh, there's one about redundancy, or there's one about confidence. So, you know, you can go through and just, because they're all themed, and they've also got some superb guest speakers on there as well. So that's another favourite book. And another favourite book, I don't know if you've read this one, is called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Yes,
I have.
Has she been a podcast guest?
She hasn't, but I tell you who has been, who you would love, because she talks about something similar, but she has a different name for it, and that's Danielle McLeod. So check her out. So we're doing a really good circle round on all these. So Radical Candor, and she talks about something compassion. But yeah, carry on.
She talks about well, she's got that quadrant. It's like, you know, you've got to care personally, but also challenge people directly. Yeah, and it's there's a quadrant, and the top right hand quadrant is when you care personally about your staff, but you can also challenge them directly if they're not doing a good job, and that's the radical candor. But if you went into the top left quadrant, which I've known a lot of managers who've done this in the past, they really care about you, they definitely do care, but they're not very good at challenging you, so they end up being, and it's called ruinous empathy. Top left, and it really struck a chord with me, because I've met a lot of bosses who they so want to be nice to you, they don't ever challenge you, and then the next minute everyone loses because they don't tell you that you're doing a bad job. Everyone else in the team is really fed up because you're doing a bad job and getting away with it. And in the meantime, the manager hates being a manager because it's not working and the team's not being very effective. So I love that book. She's Kim Scott, as you obviously know. She worked for some huge corporates in the States, and it's very readable. It's very punchy, isn't it? So I love that book.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And yeah, I'd definitely suggest checking out Danielle McLeod as well.
I've just written it down as we speak.
Here you go. So she talks about heart-centered leadership, but her phrase was ruthless compassion.
Right,
I just always thought that was just different, sort of a different spin on what you've just said as well. So yeah. Lovely. So just before my last couple of questions, your other question that I haven't yet heard come out in the conversation is, what would be your mantra?
Just do it, like Nike. Just do it. because people, I'm very curious when I'm listening to other people, and you say, well, why don't you do that? Oh, I've had a great idea and I'd really like to do this. And I say, well, just do it. And they're like, and then they throw up loads of reasons why they shouldn't. And I just say, well, just do it. What can go, the worst thing that can happen is it cannot work, and then you just stop doing it. So just do it, and just go for it.
I'll go along with that. I had an ex-boyfriend once who used to spend all his time complaining about stuff, and I remember him saying things like, oh, I haven't phoned my dad. And I'd go, well, go on then. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, just phone him. And he used to hate the fact that I always used to, like, as we call it in our house, turn into the skid. I always used to go, well, just go and do it then. Why are we, let's not sit here complaining about it. Just go and do it. And it was like, no, I want to sit here and complain about it, which is why he then became an ex-boyfriend.
Well, and then I think everything falls down into, and I think you're probably very similar, but there's people who are radiators and there are people who are drains.
Oh, yes.
And I'm always drawn very much to the radiators, and I'm sure you are as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or sometimes you're drawn to the drain and you don't realise it until too late.
Yeah. And then they become the ex eventually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So last couple of questions then. So what about those days where it all goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with those?
I think I'm quite resilient. I think I've learned that about myself. I had a few, knocks along the way, divorce and bits and bobs like that. And actually leaving the police was a bit of a struggle with. I could have struggled with that, but I think I'm quite good at picking myself and dusting myself down. I do give myself a good talking to, but if I'm really having a bad day, I'll just talk to one of many close friends. And just get it out there. I don't keep things in particularly. I usually just speak to somebody and just have a bit of a vent, and then I am pretty good afterwards at picking myself up and starting off again, because none of it has been particularly, it's not life and death, the things I'm talking about. It's just sometimes things might have been a bit difficult, or I'll just talk to people and then just pick myself up, give myself a bit of a break. I'm quite good at sort of saying to myself, give yourself a break, do something nice for myself. Perhaps that's when I will take some time, and just, if I have a day, I would take myself up to the lakes and have a good walk, get some fresh air, and go up a fell, and I would definitely feel better after that.
Yeah. So that moves on to what about those days where you get to live more, where you get to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't? What do they look like? The walk up the fell?
Oh, definitely. Back in sort of different situation. I lived in Austria for a long time, so that would be a ski. In the summer, I could walk up the mountains, and in the winter, it would definitely be a sort of few hours skiing. So I was very privileged in my early 20s, and very much still got itchy feet for those times, because I lived in the mountains in Austria, and that's me. I love that environment. And so a good day would look like that. I'd be outside probably, got rosy cheeks, and come back in and be having a nice cup of tea and a glass of wine, chatting to friends after, with aching legs and rosy cheeks, I think.
Lovely. Thank you, Christine. So great to speak to you today. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch.
I'm on LinkedIn, so it's just Christine Morrison, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And I have an email, Christine@CMA Training, and the website is called cmatraining.com.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining me.
It's an absolute pleasure, Jo. Lovely to speak to you.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 171, then you'll find them there. And this week I'm going to keep it really short, because it's so hot in England at the moment, or certainly in the south of England where I am, and it's late, it's gone midnight, and it's still really hot. I don't know what degrees, 25 or something probably. So not really conducive to working. I've been talking with my Australian students this week, and they've been laughing, saying, what you're getting is just like a normal day in Australia. It'd be a lovely day. But I keep reminding them we don't have air conditioning. So we've had a good few days of it being quite tough. And then today
there was a bit of a breeze and the sun wasn't out even though it was warm, so Simon and I sat in the garden and worked from there, and that was actually quite nice today, but it's gone hot again now, although we're expecting a thunderstorm. Somebody on Facebook said it was going to happen at 10 o'clock, and that was about 3 hours ago, so it doesn't appear to have happened so far. So this week I just wanted to talk briefly about productivity tools, which is what we discussed at Counterpoint Networking this week. And it was quite a wide-ranging discussion, albeit there were few of us because, again, I think the weather probably got in the way. I wasn't really expecting anyone to turn up, but the stalwarts did come along. And we talked about lots of different things. So we talked about some apps called Notability, which was for note-taking and using an iPad and a pen to actually sort of write on. We had a big discussion about the fact that many people like pen and paper, and in fact, if you're a regular podcast listener, you'll know that many of my guests, probably all of them bar about 4, do most of their planning and task management through pen and paper, unlike me, and I hardly ever use pen and paper. We talked about mind mapping, and I said that I used to use, or I tried, I don't really like mind maps myself, but I tried MindMeister. And Gilly said that she uses something called Iowa Mind Map for Kids, which she's not sure if it's still in that guise, but it's basically mind mapping for children, which makes it much more colourful and a bit sort of less linear than you might get in the other options. We talked about Evernote as a tool for keeping notes, and I was saying some of the things that I use my Evernote for. Basically, any meeting I have, I just jot the minutes, the notes straight into my Evernote account. I used to keep recipes on there, but I don't do that now. I've got a really cool app called Paprika that I use now, but I did used to use it for recipes. I use it to keep things like instruction booklets, either that I've scanned or that I've downloaded from the internet for the things that I have. I scan useful content so that I can get rid of the paper and keep it safe somewhere. I've got a packing checklist on there for when I go away. If I've seen interesting articles that I want to go back to and perhaps learn from and use as a checklist in the future, then I stick those into Evernote too. And the reason I do that is it's really easy to do so, but also the search is really good, so you can easily find things once you've put them into Evernote. We also talked about password software, so a way that you can save passwords so that you don't use the same password for many different sites, and also that you can use, because you're not having to remember them, quite complicated passwords, so they're much more secure. We talked about LastPass, which is what I use, and if you go to joedodds.com/recommends/LastPass, that'll take you there. And in fact, I should have given you the link to Evernote, joedodds.com/recommends/Evernote. You can see the pattern there. So LastPass, and there's one called, or was it First Password, I think might be one of the other, or is it First Pass? But, basically a password management tool is really key. I've talked before about the to-do list tool that I use, which is Todoist, which I think is really cool because it can be really simple, but also it can be really sophisticated. There's so much functionality in there, and they're changing it all the time. They're developing it all the time. New updates come through constantly. So really good recommendation from me for that one. We talked about CRMs, and I was saying that I use Capsule CRM, which I have used for quite a long time now, and I've used it across my business, the choir that I used to be the secretary for, and we use it at Engage for Success as well. And again, I find it really simple. The interface is really simple and straightforward, and you sort of know where you are with it, but it actually has quite a lot of functionality as well. And so that's joedodds.com/recommends/capsule, I think. I don't think it's got the CRM on it. And then Penny mentioned a couple of references who I was very aware of. So Asian Efficiency is a really cool company that I listen to their podcast, but they also have a website and a membership site that has lots of interesting productivity stuff on it. And also she mentioned the Productivity Ninja, which is Graham Olcott, who actually was a podcast guest a number of shows ago. So I can't remember off the top of my head what number, but if you go to the website and do a search on the blog section or the podcast section for Graham Olcott, and that's with an H, and Olcott is ALLCOTT, then you'll find his interview with me there. So that's most of what we were discussing. And clearly we could have carried on for hours talking about different types of productivity tools. Oh, the other one I didn't mention was Zapier, which is the tool that you can use to connect two platforms or two apps, two tools together to help to create automation, which I've mentioned on many occasions before. So that was another one that we talked about. So yeah, lots to talk about, and of course all the notes from that meeting will go up onto the Counterpoint Networking website under the resources shared, so that people who have been to meetings and are members can look at those. So if you're interested, please do go to counterpointnetworking.co.uk. I'm feeling like I'm tripping over my words this evening. I think it's just because it's so hot. So I'm going to stop now. Again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/171. And we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.